Good evening, everyone. This week's Parsha is Parsha's Lech-Lecha, Tafshin Pei Beis. I dedicate this evening's learning in memory of my mother, Mrs. Shalamis Rabinowitz, Shalamis Mas Rav Yaakov Eliezer. Our learning should be an aliyah for her neshama. I want to focus on a part of the Parsha where Avram is performing the bris ben habesarim, the covenant between the pieces, which was a covenant between Hashem and Abraham about the future of the Jewish people, coming from Abraham, getting Eretz Yisrael, getting the Torah. And when Abraham is having a prophecy, Hashem tells him a very important message. You shall surely know, your children shall be strangers in a land that's not theirs, and they shall enslave them and afflict them for 400 years. This refers to the Egyptian bondage. Okay, the Gam es Hagaya Shayavaidu, and also the nation that will enslave them. Donanechi, I will judge. And afterwards they shall go out with great possessions. So Hashem tells Abraham in the dream that there will be a point of time where his children shall be enslaved and afflicted for 400 years. And as I said, this refers to the Egyptian bondage. Then it says, and also I shall judge the nation that will enslave them. That means that Hashem is going to hold them responsible for their enslaving the Jewish people. Now, the word v'gam, and also, is a very interesting word. What do you mean, and also the nation that will enslave them I will judge? They'll be enslaved 400 years, and that nation, Hashem says, I will judge them, I shall punish them, I shall hold them accountable for doing so. What's the v'gam and also? So Ramban Nachmanides in his commentary explains that the v'gam means to say like this. Although I have decreed that the Jewish people should be enslaved in Egypt for 400 years and be afflicted, I will still judge them for doing so. I shall still hold them accountable for doing so. So you should know your children will be enslaved for 400 years and be afflicted. And also, meaning, and nonetheless, and with all that, although I have decreed this, that they shall be enslaved by the Egyptians, I will judge, I will hold the Egyptians accountable for doing so. So now the question becomes, well, if Hashem decreed that the Jewish people should be enslaved for 400 years by the Egyptians, then what did they do wrong? What are they being punished for? So the Ramban has a very interesting explanation. And the Ramban begins by explaining that although the Hashem did decree that the Egyptians should enslave and afflict the Jewish people, if the Egyptians would have just done that, enslaved them, and whatever afflicted would mean, but they would have, they would have enslaved them, then the Egyptians would have just been doing what they're supposed to do. But they did more. They drowned the Jewish children. They afflicted them much more. They made them work much more than they needed to. Because of the fact that the Egyptians did more than what the decree was, that's what they're punished for, says the Ramban. So if they would have just enslaved them, if the Egyptians would have just enslaved the Jewish people, they would have been just fulfilling Hashem's decree. However, being that they did more than that, therefore, they're punished for doing more. And the Ramban brings a medrash that says like that Hashem says, I told you to enslave them. Good, so if you would have enslaved them is one thing, but you went even further. You drowned the children. You tried to stop them from multiplying. You gave them back-breaking labor. You oppressed them. And therefore, that's what they're punished for. That's the Ramban's first explanation. And then the Ramban adds another idea, which he actually doesn't explicitly apply it to the Egyptians, interestingly. But he says, for instance, if on Rosh Hashanah, when we're judged, a person is judged to be killed. So the person who kills that person cannot say, or we don't say, well, he just did what Hashem decreed. You can't be vindicated that way. Why? Because, every person has free will. And how exactly put together Hashem's decrees with man's free will, is the ultimate question. But a person has free will, and from his point, he just killed this person because he wanted to. But says the Ramban that if, let's say, a prophet says something should happen, and you fulfill now, and you hear the prophecy, and you fulfill what the prophet says, and that's your intention, even in a mitzvah, you fulfill what you're supposed to do. And the Ramban gives example of that from Tanakh. But when he discusses Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the first Beis HaMikdash, he says Nebuchadnezzar, we find, was completely obliterated. Eventually, in his downfall, he and the Babylonians were completely obliterated. And that was because, although the prophets did prophesy that he should destroy the Beis HaMikdash, and he knew that. And we see that from verses in Tanakh. We see that from verses from the book of Jeremiah, that the prophets, and before Jeremiah, Isaiah, other prophets were always talking about how Babylonia shall destroy the Beis HaMikdash. And the Babylonians knew about that, says the Ramban. There's even a pasuk that says that the general of the Babylonians says, we're carrying out what Hashem decreed upon you. They knew the prophecy. And if they would have just done it to fulfill Hashem's command, Hashem's will, they would have been in good shape. The problem is they didn't do it because of that. Because it says the Ramban, says Nachmanides, if you were to hear a prophecy from a prophet that Hashem wants you to punish someone, and that's why you did it, you're in good shape. But if you do it because you dislike the person, or you do it for some personal reason, then you're a murderer. Then you did your own thing. Then you just hurt someone. Even if Hashem, the prophet, told you to do it, the prophet wants you to do it, and you know the prophet wants you to do it, but you don't do it to fulfill Hashem's will. You do it for your personal reasons, out of hatred, or out of some kind of game, like Nebuchadnezzar wanted to conquer the world. This is part of his conquering of the world. So he's doing it for himself. Then already Hashem holds you responsible. So if you do more than the decree, as the Egyptians, you're held responsible. And even if you hear from a prophet that you should be carrying out this punishment, but you don't do it for the sake of fulfilling Hashem's will, you do it for the hatred of that person, out of hatred for that person, or for personal reasons, then you're held responsible for it. These are the Ramban's approaches of how it can be that Hashem will decree that a people should be like the Egyptians should enslave the Jewish people, or the Babylonians should destroy the Beis HaMikdash. Hashem's decree, but to still held responsible. These are his explanations for that. He also brings down Rambam Maimonides, who also deals with this question about what does it mean when Hashem says, they shall your children shall be enslaved for 400 years, and they shall afflict them. The Ramban's discussion is a discussion about Bechira, free will. This is in Hilchas Tshuva. And the discussion about free will, we discuss this, Hashem doesn't force anyone to do anything. Now, the pasuk says, no, your children shall be enslaved for 400 years, and they shall afflict them. Hashem says, the Egyptians will enslave your children and afflict them. Does that mean that the Egyptians' free will was taken away from them? Says the Ramban, no, of course not. Doesn't mean that. Says the Ramban, although we have a decree, says the Rambam rather, Maimonides, although Hashem decrees that the Egyptians should enslave the Jewish people, he didn't force any of them to do it. He never said specifically, these Egyptians are to do this. He said, Egyptians will do it. And now really was open for the Egyptians to decide, are they going to do it or not? Every Egyptian who participated didn't have to participate. It was on their free will that they did it. So therefore, the Rambam would be saying that the reason why Hashem punishes the Egyptians, it sounds a little bit like the Rambam, but it's not the same. Here, the way the Rambam says it is because the Ramban said in his second explanation that if you hear from a prophet, but you do it for a different reason, that's something else. Then you're held responsible, even though Hashem wants you to do it. You may even know that. But if you're not doing it for that reason, you're held responsible. That's the Ramban. Rambam is saying that it has to do with the fact that Hashem never decreed upon anybody specifically, any specific Egyptian, to do what they decided to do. If they would have decided not to do it, they wouldn't have to have done it. And the Rambam ends off, and to understand how, and when Hashem says they will do it, it is a decree that something will happen. But again, when Hashem makes his decrees that something will happen, and that doesn't interfere with Bechir, with free will, that the Rambam says is the ultimate question. We don't know how Hashem is able to know what's going to happen if there's such a thing as free will. But this is the way it is. And therefore the Rambam says, that's what happened here by the Egyptians. Hashem is telling Abraham, there's a decree. The Egyptians are going to go ahead and enslave. But from the point of the Egyptians, Hashem is telling Abraham, this is what's going to be. And there's a decree that's going to be this way, that the Egyptians are going to do it. But never were any one of the Egyptians forced in any way or told in any way to have to go do it. And therefore, they're responsible. They had their free will. Their free will wasn't taken away from them because Hashem didn't force them. As he says, every one of the Egyptians, if they wouldn't have wanted to have enslaved, they didn't have to do it. Nothing was forcing them to do it. And when Hashem tells Abraham they're going to enslave them, from the point of the Egyptians' free will, that means to say, Hashem says it's going to happen because Hashem knows what's going to happen in the future. So he's telling Abraham this is what's going to happen. And it's a decree that it's going to happen. It's a decree that it should happen. But from the point of the Egyptians, Hashem is telling telling Abraham, there's a decree. This is what's going to be. This is what's going to happen. But no one of them was in any way commanded or forced to have to do it. If they didn't want to do it, they didn't have to do it. And therefore, says the Ramban, that's how Rambam is explaining the responsibility. The responsibility is because even though there was a decree for the Egyptians to do this, no one Egyptian was forced to have to fulfill that decree. Now, Ramban is not comfortable with the Rambam because he says that if Hashem wants, or basically, we'll keep it simple, if Hashem wants the Egyptians to enslave the Jewish people, then there should be Egyptians that are doing it. If a king tells a people, I want you to do this, and some people say, well, he didn't tell me specifically, I'm not going to do it. That's not going to make the king happy. And those who are going to do it make the king happy. And in this case, says the Ramban, it says, the nation's going to enslave. It's not going to be individual Egyptians doing it. It's going to be the Egyptian nation doing it. So Hashem wants the Egyptian nation to enslave the Jewish people. So if they do it, they're doing what Hashem wants them to do. How can you hold them responsible? Well, they didn't have to do it. If they wouldn't do it, then they're not doing what Hashem wants them to do. That's the question that Nachmanides asked on Maimonides. Again, Nachmanides said an idea that if Hashem wants you to do it, but you do it for a different reason, you're held responsible for what you did. Rambam is saying, no one ever told any one of you to do it. And it's true. No specific Egyptian got a command from God, you go do this. But it's clear that when Hashem told Abraham that that your children are being enslaved, that there is a decree for the Egyptians to enslave them. This is what Hashem wants the Egyptians to do. So now you're going to tell me, well, none of them had to do it. What do you mean none of them had to do it? Hashem wants him to do it. If a king wants you to do something, then you should be doing it. That's the Ramban's question on Rambam. So I want to share with you an interesting answer that I heard in a lecture given by Rabbi Gershon Ribner. He is a Rav in Lakewood. And he explained it this way. Very interesting answer. And he bases it on a fascinating Gemara in Baba Basra, tractate Baba Basra. It's a conversation between a Roman general and the great Rabbi Akiva. And there's a lot to this discussion. But let's go through it. So the Gemara says that the evil Turnus Rufus, he was a Roman general who was well versed in the Jewish religion, and he used to debate Rabbi Akiva. So he asked Rabbi Akiva, if your God loves the poor, Then why doesn't he support them? If he loves the poor, why does he make them poor? Good question. Omar Loi, so Rabbi Akiva said to him, so that we should be saved through them from the punishment of the afterlife. Meaning, these people are deserving some kind of suffering. Now Hashem, but at the same time, they need some kind of sustenance. They got to live. And for some reason, Hashem has decreed upon them that that sustenance doesn't come easy. These people are deserving some kind of difficulty. And the difficulty is done in a way that now we who help that person and give them their sustenance will get a mitzvah. So that's why they're poor. They're poor because basically they're deserving of being, for some reason Hashem wants them to be poor. And he gives us the chance to have the merit of giving tzedakah, of giving charity. Omar Loi, so Turnus Rufus turned back to Rabbi Akiva and said, Adarab, on the contrary, this should actually be considered a sin on your part of supporting the poor. Why? He says, I'll give you a parable. Imagine a king became very angry at one of his servants for doing something wrong, for whatever reason, and he jailed him, and he commanded that he should not be fed or be given to drink. That was his punishment. In jail, no food, no drink. And then somebody goes and gives him food and drink, sneaks in, without anybody seeing, he sneaks him in food and drink. And then the king finds out about it. Don't you think the king is going to get angry for undermining what he was trying to do? Says Turnus Rufus, and you, the Jewish people, you're called avadim, you're called servants, as it states. Kali b'nei Yisrael avadim. The Jewish people are servants of mine. Well, if you're servants, so this poor man is a servant that God has said doesn't deserve food or drink, and you're undermining what he's trying to do. Omar Rabbi Akiva, so Rabbi Akiva said back to Turnus Rufus, I'll respond to you with a parable. This can be compared to a king who became angry at his son. He became so angry at his son that he decreed, that he ordered that his son be put in jail and not be given food and not to be given drink. And somebody went and snuck in food and drink to the prince. What do you think the king is going to do then? The king is actually going to reward him. Because at some point, the king is going to get over what he did and wants his son to be alive and will feel indebted to the person who kept his son alive. And we, said Rabbi Akiva, to the Roman general, are called Hashem's children. Dechsiv, as it is written, you are children to God. Okay? So if the king gets angry at his child and someone helps the child survive, the king's not upset. So Turnus Rufus said, wait a minute. You're called children, and you're also called servants. So what are you, children or servants? The answer is that when you do Hashem's will, you're his children. When you are his servant, you're called servants where you're not doing Hashem's will. And right now, says Turnus Rufus Rabbi Akiva, look around you. Beis Hamikdash destroyed. Your nation is in shambles. You're not Hashem's children now. You're Hashem's servants. And Rabbi Akiva's response to him was, as the commentaries there point out, no matter how much we've sinned, we are still children. So Turnus Rufus and Rabbi Akiva were having here a very interesting discussion about the status of the Jewish people, even in a state of destruction, even in a state of sin. Turnus Rufus says, you're servants. If you're servants, then you shouldn't be helping each other. When a king gets angry at his servant, and because of that, takes away food and drink from him, you don't help him out. And Akiva's response is, no, we're children. And therefore, we do that. And we're all children of Hashem. So even the children that Hashem is, for some reason, deciding to hold back food and drink, when if somebody helps Hashem's child, the king's happy. So Rabbi Ribner wanted to suggest that when the Rambam says that the way that the Rambam Maimonides will answer Nachmanides' question, which was, what do you mean no one Egyptian was told that he has to do it? No one Egyptian was commanded in any way to do it. They all did it on their own. And the Ramban says, that's what they're supposed to do, isn't it? If the king decrees he wants people to do something, shouldn't they be doing it? So Rambam would say, it depends. It depends. If we're talking about Hashem's children, then even if Hashem wants someone to punish those children, he will be more than happy for those who don't volunteer their services. And therefore, those who did, and maybe even did saying, and they did it, oh, we're doing what the king wants. The king would say, those are my children. Why are you volunteering to do it? Why are you choosing to do it? So again, Hashem has this decree, and it's a decree that says it's going to happen. But as the Rambam says, no one Egyptian was commanded to do it. And if any Egyptian decided now to fulfill the king's decree, but he's doing it against the princes and the princesses, the king's not going to be happy about that. Those are my children. If he didn't have to do it, then you should stay away. Ramban would perhaps argue and say, well, there's a difference between the case where you're giving food and drink to keep them alive, or when the king tells you to do something and you don't do it. But I really wanted to suggest this is where the Rambam is coming from. Rambam is coming from the fact that since we are Hashem's children, if you don't have to do it, don't touch the king's kid. Don't touch the king's children. Don't touch the princes and the princesses. And the Rabbi Ribner gave a very beautiful explanation to a Gemara in Gittin. The Gemara in Gittin is talking about, there's a section of the Gemara in Gittin that is well known for being studied on Tisha B'Av because it has many interesting stories about the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. First Beis HaMikdash too. And in there's a story that as when the Romans decided to destroy the Beis HaMikdash, which the Romans had already conquered the land of Israel, but the Beis HaMikdash was still standing, and then they decided to destroy it. So the Gemara says that they sent a general. The general's name was Neron. And when Neron was approaching Yerushalayim, so he decided to make a sign, an omen, to see if he would succeed. And the Talmud says he shot an arrow in 4 directions, and every one of those arrows landed in Jerusalem or in the direction of Jerusalem. So that then was a sign from God that he will succeed in the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. But it also says that he saw a little boy coming by and asked him a question that we find interestingly many of the enemies of the Jewish people did. They stopped this little boy and they said to him, little boy, what did you learn in school today? What did they teach you today in school? So the young boy answered with a verse from the book of Yecheskel that says, "V'nasati es nikmasi be'edom yad ami Yisrael, and I shall take revenge against Edom, Rome, through the hands of my nation Israel." Now, it's very clear from different sources that they would ask the child the verse, and what the child responded was also a sign from God. It was a sign from God. And what does the child respond to Neron? I shall take revenge from Rome. So Neron says, what's going on? The arrows say I'm going to succeed. But now I hear I'm going to get punished. So he said, Hashem wants to destroy his house, the Beis HaMikdash, and then he wants to wipe his hands on me. He's going to destroy it, and then I'm going to be the one to get punished for it. So what did he do? He ran away. Neron ran away. He abandoned his post. He abandoned his position, and he went and he converted. And from his conversion to Judaism, the great Reb Meir, the great Tana, the sage of the Mishnah, Reb Meir, one of the greatest Tanoim, came from Neron, came from this convert. So how do we understand this? He clearly has this theological problem, and he says, okay, I'm running away. I'm not doing this. And then he goes to convert. What's he converting for? What's converting about? And not only that, Reb Meir comes from him. So Reb Ribner said that the explanation here is that Niron saw something that we just said. Hashem destroys the Beis HaMikdash, but those who do it for him are punished. Why? Why is that? According to the Rambam, it's because we are Hashem's children. So even when he punishes us, those who take it upon themselves to do aren't going to get away with it. When he realized that, he realized how special the Jewish people were. So number one, he wasn't going to destroy the Beis HaMikdash. That would be basic. Why would he want to destroy himself? But he converted because he understood from this how precious the Jewish people are. And because he gave up so much, if he would have destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, he would have been the victorious general. He would have been a superstar in Rome. He gave it all up. He gave up that honor. And what was he rewarded with? The honor of Torah, the honor of having a descendant, Reb Meir. Reb Meir in Pirkei Avos, the chapter of the Father, says that sages realize that your table is greater than the table of kings. That means your majesty, your glory, your honor is greater than even the majesty of kings, than the glory of kings. That came out of the Reb Meir. That came out of Reb Meir, who came out of the person who gave up all his royal and kingly and noble honor for becoming a Jew, for the Torah. And that's why that was his conversion was about. Because we are Banim, we are Hashem's children. And therefore, anybody decides, even if they're carrying out Hashem's decree, you decide to be the one to do it, Hashem is not happy. You didn't have to do it. And it's my son, and it's my daughter. It's my children. If you started with my children, you're going to be responsible. That's what Newman understood. That's why he converted. And that is the greatness of the Jewish people. Have a wonderful evening.